A border was only a line on a map until a pact decided your life could be erased with a vote. Then it became theology, law, a blade. Celeste Starfall had grown up hearing that the northern border was merciless, that the Alpha King's ice wards judged truth better than any court and killed liars where they stood. By dusk on the ninth day of hunger, that old warning had become the only mercy she could still imagine. If her own blood had named her cursed, if her home had traded her safety for a convenient lie, then she would place herself in the one place no one dared follow and let fate choose. Wind drove needles of cold through the torn seams of her cloak as she climbed the last rise. The ward stones stood ahead in a broken crescent, waist-high monoliths glazed in frost, each carved with moon runes that carried a silver glow beneath the ice. Her boots were long gone. Strips of cloth wrapped her feet, stiff with frozen mud. Her belly, heavy and undeniable beneath layers of rough wool, tightened with a dull ache that made her pause and brace both hands above the curve. "Easy," she whispered, lips cracked. "We're close." Her breath smoked white. The scent of pine and iron and old snow filled her nose. Under it lingered the metallic memory of torchlit halls and accusation. She could still hear the great room of Shadowfang Keep, the scrape of benches, the hungry silence before a verdict, the relief on faces that had once smiled at her as children. Relief that the trouble had a name now, and the name was hers. By the time the last light bled out behind the mountain ridge, her shaking had turned from cold to exhaustion. She forced herself down to one knee behind a ward stone, pressed her palm flat to the frozen ground, and let the present tense of terror steady her. "I am still breathing. I am still carrying this child. I am not what they called me. I am not unclean, not a thief in my own home, not the curse they needed for their neat little story. I remember every face in that hall and what each one chose when it mattered. I remember Drake lifting his chin like a benevolent ruler while he held my father's signet ring in his fist. I remember how quickly people decide a woman is dangerous when she is alone. Keep moving. Keep moving. If I stop, they name this ending for me too. The ring. The forged witness marks. The false moon ritual with ash mixed to mimic sacred ink. Every piece had been arranged, and she had watched it close around her like a trap built by someone who had memorized her footsteps. Drake Shadowfang had done what ambitious men did best: commit a crime, then offer stability in exchange for gratitude. 9 nights earlier, the court had packed itself shoulder to shoulder while sleet rattled against high windows. Celeste had stood in a plain gray dress because they had taken her formal colors, her wrists bare because they had cut away her family cuffs, her pulse loud enough to drown the opening rites. Elder Marin, who had once kissed Celeste's brow after her first hunt, held up a slate tablet as if it were divine truth. "Witness marks confirm seduction of the air and unlawful moon invocation," Marin had said, voice flat with ceremonial distance. "The unborn issue presents unknown blood risk to pack continuity." Celeste's throat had burned. "Those marks are false. I never entered his chambers. Ask the guard roster from that night. Ask for real ink tests." "We already asked," another elder snapped. Drake had stepped forward then, dark hair braided in succession knots he had no right to wear. He kept his expression grieved, almost tender. "Cousin, no one wants this outcome. Admit what happened and accept cleansing exile. We can still show compassion." Compassion. The word had landed like rot. "You forged those marks," she said, louder than she meant to. "You stole my father's signet before his body was cold. You staged that ritual." A murmur had moved through the benches, unsettled but brief. Then the heir himself, pale and sweating with shame, stared at the floor and said nothing. Not denial, not defense, nothing. Marin had struck the floor with her staff. "Enough. By council authority, Celeste Starfall is stripped of claim and cast from Shadowfang lands at moonrise. Drake's gaze had met hers, and in that single glance she had seen the machinery underneath the performance. Calculation, relief, triumph. The formal sentence had been swift. Her mother's trunk was seized. Her father's records were sealed. 2 guards escorted her to the old grain outbuilding on the east slope until moonrise, as if kindness required a waiting room. They barred the door from the outside. The breaking point came in darkness, with straw dust in her nose and the taste of old wood on every breath. She had folded herself against a wall, arms around her middle, counting heartbeats to keep panic from swallowing thought. Somewhere in the yard, men laughed over spiced broth. Someone was singing a harvest song. Bootsteps approached. A key turned. Drake entered alone, carrying a lantern and a thin packet wrapped in oilskin. He did not bother with pity this time. "You should have taken the gentle path," he said, setting the packet on an overturned bucket. Confession, tears, quiet departure. People adore remorse. Celeste pushed herself to her feet. "Why are you here?" "To settle terms." He unwrapped the packet. Transfer writs already stamped with her forged seal. "Sign these and the road will be easier. Refuse, and I circulate notices to every allied pack that you are unstable and dangerous. They will return you in chains." She stared at the documents. Custodial language, asset language, clauses about bloodline management and provisional guardianship over her unborn child. Ice moved through her veins. "You cannot own a child," she said. His smile never reached his eyes. "Ownership is a crude word. Stewardship, strategic continuity. You know how council law reads when frightened elders hold the pen." He stepped closer, dropping his voice. "I need your motherline inheritance legally tethered before the winter convocation. Once your signature is in place, I can stabilize succession and prevent outside claims. You vanish, I govern. Everyone survives. Family protecting family." There was the abyss, plain and practical. He was not banishing her out of outrage. He was harvesting her. Celeste lunged for the papers. Drake caught her wrist hard enough to bruise, twisted and shoved her back against the wall. Lantern light jumped across his face, turning him angular and strange. "Do not mistake pregnancy for leverage," he said, very softly. "You have no standing left." Something old and fierce rose through her fear then, not rage alone, but refusal. She drove her knee into his thigh, tore free, and slammed the lantern into the dirt floor. Flame guttered, flared, died in spilled sand. In the dark confusion, she found the fallen key by touch, scraped knuckles on splintered wood, and ran. The yard was a blur of sleet and shadows. A shout split the night. She ducked beneath a cart tongue, crawled through a gap in the fence where storm rot had eaten the posts, and stumbled downhill into black pines while horns began to sound behind her. Branches whipped her face. Mud swallowed her ankles. At the creek, she nearly fell, caught herself on a rock, and kept moving with one hand always braced over her belly. 3 days passed before the search calls faded to distant rumor. On the 5th day, she traded her last silver clasp for a heel of bread at a crossroads hut and slept under an overturned sled. On the 7th, she burned with fever for a night and woke shivering but clear-headed beneath a stand of fir. By the 9th dusk, the mountains had opened to the northern ridge and the wardstones waited like a tribunal older than men. Now, with snow beginning again in thin, relentless threads, Celeste hauled herself upright and stepped between 2 carved monoliths. Cold surged up through her feet, then stopped. Not warmth, not safety. A held breath in the world itself. The runes beneath the ice brightened, one after another in a widening ring around her. Her knees buckled. She reached for the nearest stone and missed, hitting the ground on her side with a breathless gasp. She tried to rise again and could not. The baby shifted once, then went still in a way that felt calm rather than fear. From somewhere beyond the ridge came the muted thunder of fast-moving paws, too heavy for ordinary wolves. Celeste turned her face toward the dark line of the fortress walls, pressed her numb fingers into the snow, and waited for judgment. Judgment came first as sound, then shape. The pounding over frozen ground was too synchronized for a wild hunt, too heavy for ordinary scouts, and it closed the distance in seconds. Celeste forced herself onto one elbow, breath snagging in her chest as 6 wolves broke over the ridge in a crescent formation, fur dark as wet stone, shoulders broad enough to look unreal in the moonless blue. Silver collars flashed at their throats, etched with the same runes burning beneath the ice around her. They did not rush her. They stopped exactly at the edge of the lit circle, paws planted, steam lifting from their coats in dense white ribbons. Discipline radiated from them, not hunger. One dipped its head, inhaled, and a low warning rolled through the group when it caught her scent. Pregnant. Stranger. South Pack blood. Celeste pressed her palm into the snow and tried to stand anyway. Her legs shook so violently she nearly collapsed a second time. She swallowed, tasted metal, and lifted her chin toward them because there was no dignity left except what she claimed by force. "If your law kills liars," she said, voice rough and thin, "then let your law test me. I crossed alone. I asked sanctuary under witness of your ward stones." The largest wolf stepped forward 1 pace. Moonlight slid over an old scar across its muzzle. It stared at her, then at the glowing runes, then back again, as if comparing 2 verdicts. A second wolf shifted first, bones moving under fur in a fluid, practiced snap that left a broad-shouldered man crouched at the boundary line, bare-chested despite the cold, black braid over one shoulder. He rose slowly with both hands visible. "You are standing in King Ward territory," he said. "No one enters this ring without command." "Then command it," she answered. "Or finish it." His gaze narrowed, not cruel, simply measuring. "Name." Celeste Starfall. Recognition flickered across his expression, quick and sharp enough to unsettle her. News traveled faster than hunger then. Faster than weather. Another wolf shifted, then another, until 4 warriors stood in a half-circle around the glow, all wearing dark leather and fur-lined pauldrons marked with the northern crest. None crossed the line. None reached for her. The first man spoke again, quieter. "Stay still. The ward has accepted your bloodprint for temporary hold. If you move outside the stones before review, it could tear through you." The statement should have terrified her. Instead, it landed as structure, a rule with edges she could understand. She stayed where she was, knees half-folded beneath her, hand over the aching weight of her belly. Wind dragged snow over the ridge in veils. The runes hummed through the ground, a faint vibration climbing her bones. She watched the sentries exchange signals with 2 fingers and a tilt of the wrist, efficient and wordless. One wolf remained in full form, ears pinned toward the fortress as though listening for a distant call. Then, the entire formation changed. Every warrior straightened at once, shoulders locking, eyes shifting past Celeste to the dark line of pines behind her. The remaining wolf lowered its head almost to the snow. Respect. Instinctive. Absolute. A figure emerged between the trees with no escort and no hurry, tall enough to turn the night around him into a frame. Fur-lined black cloak. Dark hair bound at the nape with a steel ring. Gloves off despite the cold, as if winter answered to him instead of the other way around. He walked straight toward the ward circle, and the humming under Celeste's palms deepened to a low pulse that matched her racing heartbeat. She had heard stories of the Northern King since childhood, most of them contradictory, and all of them sharp-edged. Merciless judge, oath-bound protector, beast in a crown, ghost that wore a man's skin. None of those tales had prepared her for the precision of him, for the way he seemed carved from the same iron discipline as the stones themselves. No ornament, no wasted motion. Power held so tightly it looked like stillness. He stopped at the boundary, boots inches from the glowing frost. His gaze dropped to her and stayed there. Not on the torn cloak first, not on the mud-caked bandages around her feet. Not even on the unmistakable curve of her abdomen, on her face, as if searching for a specific answer only she could give. The first sentry bowed his head. My king. She entered under full ward activation, claimed sanctuary and named herself Celeste Starfall. We have not touched her. The man did not look away from Celeste. You did right. His voice was low, edged with gravel, carrying without effort. It moved through her like the memory of heat after a long fever, disorienting in its immediacy. She tried to speak and found she had forgotten how to shape language. He stepped forward. The nearest guard inhaled sharply. Sire, if she carries false oath scent, the ward may strike through contact. For the first time, irritation crossed the king's face, brief and lethal. Then it strikes me first. He entered the circle. The runes flared silver white, bright enough to erase shadows. Snow hissed where it touched the light. Every warrior outside the ring dropped to one knee, heads bowed, and Celeste had one fractured thought that made no sense at all. They are not kneeling to rank. They are bracing for impact. The king took one more step toward her, and the world narrowed to the space between them. He stopped, not arm's length away, and the scent hit. Pine smoke and winter cedar and something older, sun-warmed stone after rain, threaded through with pure alpha command that should have pushed her flat with instinctive submission. Instead, it called to a place under her ribs she had been forcing silent for months. Heat pulsed beneath her skin in a sudden, startled rhythm. Her awareness sharpened so quickly it almost hurt. She could hear each warrior's breathing outside the ring, each gust of wind against the stones, the tiny shift of fabric as the king bent toward her. His pupils widened. Amber bled into his irises in a ring of molten light. He drew a harsh breath as if punched. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then the Alpha King dropped to his knees in the snow. The motion was so abrupt, so wholly opposite what every story had promised, that Celeste flinched backward in pure reflex. He did not grab her. He did not issue an order. He set one bare hand on the ground beside her hip, the other hovering near her throat, waiting. "May I?" he asked. No king had ever asked her permission for anything. Celeste stared at him, trembling hard enough that her teeth clicked. His face was close now, carved lines and controlled fury and a scar beneath his jaw disappearing into his collar. He smelled like danger and safety in the same breath. It was unbearable. "I do not know what this is," she whispered. His mouth tightened, grief and wonder colliding in a way she could not parse. "I do." Her thoughts fractured into present-tense shards, bright and panicked and raw. This is a trap. This is what men like Drake design. Ceremony, witness, mercy as theater. Do not trust a beautiful weapon. Do not mistake power for kindness. Keep your child safe. Keep breathing. But the baby, restless for hours, had gone deeply still the moment he stepped into the circle, not in fear, in calm. A quiet settled through her body that belonged to no memory she trusted. Her terror stayed. So did that steadying pull. Both truths stood side by side, and neither would move. The king lowered his hand a fraction. "Pulse," he said, voice rougher now. "Only your pulse." She gave a single, brittle nod. His palm settled against the side of her neck, 2 fingers finding the beat with clinical care, as if confirming she was real and not some winter hallucination conjured by loneliness. The contact sent a wave of warmth through her chilled skin, not a shock, Not pain, but a deep thaw that reached muscle and bone. A low thrum built in her chest in answer, ancient and bewildered. Outside the ring, one of the guards made a broken sound. Moon above. The king did not acknowledge him. His gaze locked on Celeste's, and something ancient looked out through his eyes now. Predator and guardian fused into one impossible intensity. His control did not vanish. It cracked, then reformed around her like a vow. When he spoke again, he was no longer addressing a stranger at his border. He was speaking to the axis of his world as it shifted. Celeste Starfall, he said, each syllable deliberate, reverent. I am Dante Wildfire. The name moved through the air like a bell struck once. Warriors bowed lower outside the stones. Dante's thumb brushed lightly over her pulse point, then withdrew as if he feared taking more than she offered. You are under my protection. No harm reaches you here. She should have felt relief first. Instead, she felt tears sting the backs of her eyes, sudden and furious, because protection had been weaponized against her so often the word itself had become suspect. Dante watched her face as if he read every flinch, every guarded instinct, every place betrayal had left its mark. Look at me, he said softly. She already was. She could not stop. The bond tightened, an invisible thread drawing taut from sternum to sternum. Heat moved along it, then a strange bright current that made the fine hairs on her arms lift. Dante's shoulders went rigid. His breath hitched again, and for a moment his composure slipped enough for her to see the magnitude of what this cost him. Centuries of restraint, if the old tales held any truth. Command built from solitude. A king who had survived by never needing anyone. Need had found him anyway. His hand hovered over her belly, then paused. May I? Celeste's answer came from somewhere deeper than thought. Yes. He placed his palm gently over the wool at the curve of her abdomen. The child kicked once, strong and certain, directly into his hand. Dante closed his eyes like a man receiving absolution he had not dared request. The ward stones blazed brighter, silver lines racing through the carved runes in widening circles that pushed back the dark. Snow began to melt in a perfect ring around them, steam curling upward in pale ribbons. When he opened his eyes, the molten amber had settled, steadier now, no less fierce. Bring blankets and a heated litter, he ordered without looking away from her. Summon the infirmary, quietly. No hall alarms, no gossip runners, no council notice until I speak it myself. Boots struck snow as the warriors moved. Celeste swayed. Dante caught her elbow before she tipped, grip firm but careful, waiting for resistance. She did not pull away. The moment his hand steadied her, that impossible calm in the child deepened, and the knot of panic behind her ribs loosened by one fragile degree. He rose first, then helped her stand, keeping his body between her and the wind. Can you walk 3 steps to me? He asked. Such a small distance, such a vast test. Celeste nodded and took 1, then 2, then 3 unsteady steps into the shelter of his arms as the northern wolves returned with furs and fire-heated iron. Dante wrapped a cloak around her shoulders himself, tucking it close without crowding her breathing, and when her gaze lifted to his again, recognition was no longer a question hanging in winter air. It was a claim neither of them had chosen, and neither of them could deny. Dante did not repeat it as they moved. He did not brand it into command or use it to hurry her into obedience. He simply kept pace with her faltering steps down the ridge path, while 2 sentries carried braziers ahead, their coals casting red light over ice-carved walls that rose from the mountain like a blade turned upright. The fortress gate opened without trumpet call. No public announcement, no spectacle. Wolves in dark guard leathers bowed and stepped aside, faces carefully blank, though their eyes tracked Celeste with the strained curiosity of soldiers watching a storm cross familiar land. Dante gave clipped orders that left no room for debate. South Infirmary Wing, Private Ward, 2 female attendants on rotation, no council entry without my seal. A broad woman with silver-threaded braids met them in the inner corridor, healer's satchel slung across one shoulder. She took in Celeste's state in one sweep, then looked to Dante. Do you stay? Dante's jaw tightened once. If she asks? The healer turned to Celeste, and the question in her gaze was clean, not ceremonial. Celeste swallowed. Stay until I sit, then wait outside. Dante nodded as if she had granted him a treaty. The infirmary room held heat, herbs and stone polished by decades of use. Copper lamps glowed against pale walls etched with moon phases. Dante guided her to the edge of a narrow bed layered with fur and thick linen, then let go immediately. He did not crowd while the healer unwrapped frozen cloth from her feet. He did not interrupt when Celeste hissed at the sting of thawing skin. When the healer said the wet cloak had to come off and dry garments had to be fitted around her belly, Dante stepped to the door and turned his back before anyone asked. That small act struck harder than any vow. Men like Drake had always called her body a matter of law. A vessel, a risk, an asset, a scandal. Never hers, never private. Dante stood on the other side of the threshold with 2 guards at distance, giving orders in a low voice while female attendants worked quickly at her laces and helped her into a soft shift and wool overwrap. He entered again only after healer Era nodded. Frostbite is shallow, Era said. Exhaustion is not. She needs broth, sleep, and calm. Done, Dante said. Era hesitated. There will be questions at dawn. There will be answers at dawn, he replied. Not before. His tone carried iron, but when he looked back at Celeste, the steel altered. Not softened. Focused. You are safe in this room. Safety was a word with too many broken bones inside it. She meant to tell him that. Her lips parted. Nothing came out except a tired breath. Dante moved to the side table, lifted an iron cup, and held it over the brazier. Heat shimmered over his palm, gathering unnaturally fast. The metal warmed from black to dull red, then settled back as he poured steaming water over crushed mint and winter bark. He offered the cup but did not press it into her hand until she reached. Drink slow, he said. She drank. The warmth hurt, then healed. When at last her eyes began to close, Dante rose. I will be outside the ward. You do not sleep? She asked, the question leaving her before caution could stop it. Later. He stepped out, and the door latched softly behind him. Sleep came like collapse, and terror found her anyway. She was back in the grain outbuilding, straw in her mouth, Drake's lantern flame breathing like an animal in the dark. Transfer Writ slapped the bucket in front of her. Sign. Sign now. His fingers clamped her wrist, and every door in the room sealed at once. The baby went still. No sound came out when she tried to shout. I am in the dark again. I am trapped again. If I move, he owns the child. If I stay, he owns the child. There is no clean path, only different chains. Breathe. I cannot breathe. This is what they wanted. This frozen room. This waiting. My name is gone from the record and I am vanishing with it. No. No. I am here. I am in stone walls, not wood. I am in the north, not Shadowfang lands. The door is real. The bed is real. Breathe now. Breathe now. Celeste jerked awake with a sharp, swallowed cry. Sweat cooled on her skin despite the fire. Her hands shook so badly she fisted the blanket to hide it, as if anyone might punish weakness on sight. The door opened on a quiet hinge. Dante crossed the threshold with no escort, carrying 2 iron cups wrapped in cloth. He took one look at her face and set both cups down. He did not ask what she had seen. He did not demand confession in exchange for comfort. He crouched by the bed until his eyes were level with hers. Nightmare, he said. She gave one stiff nod. He lifted a cup and held it out. Ginger and pine needle. It settles the shaking. Celeste reached, failed to still her hand, and cursed under her breath. Dante shifted closer, bracing the cup while she drank. When she was done, he set it aside and looked down at her ankles where the blankets had slipped. "The wraps are loose," he said. "May I fix them?" Permission again. Always permission. Yes. He knelt fully this time, broad shoulders bent over careful work that should have belonged to a nurse, not a king. Fresh rabbit fur lined the inner wool bands. His fingers were large, scarred, precise as he eased each strip around swollen skin and tied knots that would not constrict. The room was silent except for the small sounds of fabric and fire. A kick rolled visibly beneath her shift. Celeste froze. Dante looked up, surprise opening across his face, with almost boyish clarity before discipline returned. His voice dropped lower. "May I?" The old panic rose on instinct. Men touched to claim, men touched to measure value. Yet every movement he had made tonight had ended where she set the line. She nodded slowly. His palm settled over the curve of her belly, light enough to withdraw in an instant if she stiffened. The baby kicked again, firm, then pressed into his hand as if recognizing him through skin and wool and fear. Dante exhaled like a man stepping out of battle. "I thought," he said, and stopped. "What?" "I thought this would never happen for me." He kept his gaze on the place beneath his hand. A bond. A family that did not begin with duty and end with a grave. The confession landed without ornament, raw as winter air. Celeste studied him, trying to map this version of the feared northern king onto the legends she had carried for years. They did not align. "You could force the bond," she said quietly. "Many alphas would." His eyes lifted to hers, fierce and offended in equal measure. "Then many alphas are cowards." She flinched at the intensity, and his expression shifted at once. "Not at you," he said. "At the thought." He drew his hand back and placed it flat on his own chest, as if making an oath to witness. "I was trained that power without restraint rots from the center. I have seen what happens when men call possession protection. I buried wolves I loved because someone stronger decided consent was an inconvenience." The room held that sentence like a blade laid on stone. "No one touches you without your yes," Dante said. "Not even me, especially not me." By the time the eastern sky paled behind the frost glass windows, Celeste had slept again for one unbroken hour, and Dante was still outside her door when Ira came to wake her for the tribunal. The great hall felt larger in daylight, a long chamber of carved pillars and suspended braziers, with a moon altar at its center made from one seamless slab of white stone. Northern elders lined both sides in layered furs, silver crest pins at their throats. Soldiers ringed the walls. Whispers moved like dry leaves until Dante entered beside Celeste, then silence dropped hard. He did not place her behind him. He walked with her to the open space before the altar and stopped half a step to her left, close enough to shield, far enough to let her stand as her own witness. An elder with narrow shoulders and a voice like scraped bark rose first. "Your Majesty, we respect your authority. We also respect precedent. The woman comes from a hostile succession dispute, carries unverified bloodline factors, and triggered full ward reaction. Until she is proven clean, she should be confined." Another elder followed, caged under healer watch. "For safety." The word safety drew tight laughter from somewhere in the back ranks. Celeste's spine locked. Shame arrived with brutal speed, old and familiar. Dante moved before she could fold inward. One step, then another, until he stood between her and the hall. His upper lip lifted just enough to bare the edge of fang, his voice carried to the rafters without a shout. "Hear King Law as written before your grandsires were born. Any wolf who threatens a carrying mate under my protection challenges me directly." Murmurs broke. The first elder's face went pale. "Sire, no one threatened. We advised containment." "You named a cage," Dante said. "In this hall. To my mate." The last word struck like thunder. Two figures detached from the right column of seats, a heavy-set captain with braided beard and a younger enforcer wearing quartermaster stripes. They bowed minimally, more ritual than respect. Captain Varric spoke first. "If your judgment is clouded by bond, then challenge is lawful. We contest her status." The younger one, Tolan, added, "And the child's strategic risk." Dante's gaze sharpened into something predatory and cold. "Accepted." The dual circle was marked in chalk around the moon altar. No blades, by old custom. Strength, technique, control. Celeste stood at the boundary with Era near her shoulder, pulse hammering against her throat, while Dante shed his cloak and stepped into the ring. Varric came first with brute confidence, charging low for Dante's knees. Dante pivoted, caught his arm, and redirected momentum into stone. A breath later, Varric was on his back, wrist pinned, wind gone. Dante released him immediately and stepped away instead of finishing. Tolan shifted partially, claws extending, eyes gone feral with challenge heat. Gasps flared across the hall at the breach of form. Dante did not shift. He waited until Tolan lunged, then struck once at the shoulder joint, once at the sternum, clean and devastating. Tolan hit the floor and stayed there, stunned, claws retracting as consciousness wavered. No killing, no cruelty, just absolute superiority with the leash held tight. Dante stood over both wolves, chest rising evenly. "Yield." Varric coughed. "Yield." Tolan forced the word through clenched teeth. "Yield." "Then kneel," Dante said, and looked to the altar. "Blood oath." A bowl was brought, obsidian dark. Varric and Tolan cut their palms under Era's supervision and pressed blood to the moonstone while Dante recited the ancient vow. "By fang and rank and witnessed moon, swear fealty to Celeste Starfall's safety within northern lands. Harm plotted, spoken, or delegated breaks oath and strips name." They repeated it, voices shaking at the edges. When it was done, Dante turned, not to the elders, but to Celeste. "Do you accept their oath?" It was her choice. Publicly, irrevocably. Every eye in the hall pinned to her face. Celeste stepped forward, the hem of her wool dress brushing chalk and stone. She looked at Varric first, then Tolan, then the rows of elders who had expected her to disappear into procedure. "I accept," she said, clear and steady. "And I witness it." The words settled into the chamber like a new foundation. Dante inclined his head to her, an acknowledgement with the weight of a crown behind it. He did not touch her until she closed the distance herself and set her hand, deliberate and unshaking, against his forearm. She felt the tension in him ease by 1 degree. In her own chest, a guarded door opened just enough for light to find the threshold. The bronze doors at the far end of the hall slammed inward before that fragile feeling could settle. A border courier stumbled across the threshold with snow crusted on his cloak and one knee already bending toward the floor. "Message from the outer gate," he said, breath hard. "Peace banner from Shadowfang territory. Delegation requests immediate audience under King Law Transit." Silence went taut again, then broke into layered murmurs. Celeste's hand tightened on Dante's forearm without meaning to. He covered her fingers once, briefly, grounding rather than claiming. "Leader?" Dante asked. The courier swallowed. "Drake Shadowfang, sire. He bears legal chest seals and demands formal recognition of kin custody rights." The hall seemed to tilt. Celeste did not move, but memory struck with such force she tasted grain dust and lamp smoke. Drake at the outbuilding door, smiling like a patient teacher, while he offered chains as if they were policy. Dante turned his head enough that only she could hear him. "Do you want to leave this room before he enters it?" Every elder watched, waiting to see whether fear would decide for her. Celeste drew one measured breath. No. If he came to name me unstable, he can do it while I am standing. Something fierce and approving crossed Dante's face. He faced the dais. Open guest protocol level black. No armed retainers beyond 2. Search every document and every person. He enters by my permission, not by demand. Drake was brought in 20 minutes later beneath white transit cloth and formal neutrality rights, but nothing about him was neutral. He looked rested, well-fed, composed down to the angle of his shoulders. His braid knots marked provisional succession in Shadowfang custom, and at his belt hung a replica of the signet he had stolen from her father's chambers. Even from across the hall, Celeste could read the calculated sorrow arranged on his features. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing with precise respect to Dante before turning to her. "Cousin, I am relieved to find you alive." Her pulse kicked hard enough to hurt. Dante did not invite him closer. "State your purpose." Drake gestured, and one of his 2 permitted aides set an iron-bound chest on the floor. Wax-sealed packets lay inside, each stamped with council marks and witness knots. "I submit lawful claims under Interpack continuity statutes." Celeste Starfall departed Shadowfang lands during a documented mental break after seducing the declared heir and compromising ritual law. She is now carrying an unregistered bloodline asset tied to our succession matrix. By treaty, she and the child are to be returned to Birthpack stewardship for stabilization. The word asset hit the chamber like filth thrown at stone. Celeste stepped forward before Dante could answer. "Say that again," she said, voice steady and low. Drake turned to her with practiced gentleness. "I said stewardship, not ownership. You always preferred inflammatory language." Her nails bit her palm. "You forged witness marks. You forged rights. You forged grief at my father's pyre and took his ring before ash cooled." A few elders shifted, unsettled now that accusation had shape instead of rumor. Drake lifted both hands, patient, almost saddened. "Your Majesty, this is exactly why we sought emergency intervention, delusional fixation, emotional volatility, and an unborn heir at stake. I am requesting compassion under law." Dante's gaze had gone very still. "You are requesting transfer of my protected mate. You are also accusing her of instability while standing on my floor and addressing her as property in all but name." Drake's eyes flicked, the first true crack in his composure. "I am invoking treaty language that predates your reign." "Treaty language," Dante said, "does not outrank king law on Northern Stone." He signaled to the archivist and legal scribe stationed beside the altar. "Take the chest. Verify every seal and every hand. Send duplicate copies to River Court's independent ink master and to the Mountain Conclave registrar. If any mark is false, I treat this as cross-border fraud." Drake's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Verification can take days. In the meantime, uncertainty itself is destabilizing. I recommend temporary transfer to neutral custody." "No," Celeste said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The word carried cleanly across the chamber, and when Drake looked at her again, his eyes held something colder than annoyance. It was not anger at disobedience. It was fear that she would not fold on schedule. Dante dismissed the hall to controlled recess, keeping only command staff, Era, and the 2 archivists. Drake was escorted to a guest tower under watch. As he passed Celeste, he did not touch her, but he let a sentence fall so quietly it reached only her and Dante. "Family should solve this privately. Public scenes rarely end well for women in your condition." Dante stepped between them before the last word faded. Drake smiled as if he had offered tea, then walked on. By mid-afternoon, the fortress had changed texture. Courtyards still rang with drills, fires still burned in braziers, but conversation snapped shut when Celeste passed. Rumor had arrived before facts, and rumor moved faster than truth because it required less courage. In Dante's strategy chamber, maps and supply ledgers covered the long table, while sleet tapped against narrow windows. Captain Rhea, commander of Internal Guard, leaned over an opened letter. "We intercepted 12 copies of this in lower barracks and servant corridors. Same hand, different runners." Dante slid one sheet toward Celeste. The ink was crude, hurried. "The king shelters a southern scandal for one reason. He wants an heir and will trade northern grain for her womb." Celeste stared at the line until the words blurred. Drake had always understood the architecture of shame. He did not need swords when whispers could do the work. Rhea placed another item on the table. A narrow strip of coated parchment recovered at the stables, heat-sealed inside a harness strap. Dante broke the cipher with 3 quick substitutions, then went silent as he read. "What is it?" Celeste asked. He passed it to her. "Store rot before first deep freeze. Hunger makes councils flexible. Transfer during remedy negotiations. Blood-binding rite prepared." Her skin went cold despite the firelit room. "He is not trying to take me home," she said. "He is trying to force a binding." Ira's expression hardened. "If he links her inheritance to his line by coercive right, he can claim authority over 2 packs through her." Dante turned to Rhea. "Immediate audit of border stores. Independent tasters. No quartermaster authority without double signature." Rhea hesitated. "Sire, that flags Soren." "Soren is quartermaster," Dante said flatly. "He gets audited first." As the room emptied into urgent motion, Dante remained by the table with Celeste. For a moment neither spoke. Wind dragged along the outer walls like a low warning. "I should have told you sooner," she said. "About the writs in the outbuilding." The language he used. "You told me when you were ready," Dante answered. "That is sooner than any law deserves." She laughed once, small and incredulous, because tenderness at a map table surrounded by war plans felt almost absurd. His mouth softened at the edge, not quite a smile. "Eat," he said, pushing a plate toward her that she had forgotten was there. "Strategists make poorer decisions when hungry." "Is that king wisdom?" "No, that is Era shouting at me for 12 years." The thin humor lasted only a breath, but it broke the pressure enough for her chest to expand. She took the bread. He watched until she swallowed. "I am standing in a room where men decide borders, and no one is telling me to be quiet. I am still afraid. I am also angry enough to burn through stone. He is close enough that I can feel the heat of him without contact, and every warning I carry says distance is survival. Yet every hour beside him teaches a different equation. Trust is not a leap. It is 1,000 small permissions. He asks. He waits. He does not take. I do not know how to live inside that gentleness without bracing for the price. I want to believe it has no hidden invoice. I want that so badly it scares me more than open threats." Dante's knuckles brushed the table near her hand, not touching. "You are not alone in this room," he said, as if he had heard the shape of her thoughts. 3 hours after sunset, outcomes began to return. A raven from River Court confirmed receipt of document copies and promised full seal analysis by dawn. A scout team reported 2 border granaries tainted with bitterroot concentrate, enough to spoil stores and sicken anyone eating untested rations. Not fatal in small doses, catastrophic at scale. Soren, the northern quartermaster, denied involvement, then failed scent screen and was locked in moon iron restraints pending inquiry. The fortress shifted from wary to armed. Dante shouldered into command mode with ruthless efficiency, dispatching crews to cleanse storage pits and reallocate winter stock from mountain reserves. Every order tightened the net around Drake's scheme, and for one narrow hour Celeste let herself think they were ahead. Then the false summons arrived. A junior steward knocked at her infirmary door with a sealed tablet carrying Dante's sign and command script. Immediate transfer to Inner Keep archive level for protective relocation. No escort required beyond one healer. Era frowned before she broke the seal. His hand is right, she said, but this phrasing is wrong. He never writes no escort. Celeste's instincts sharpened. Where is he now? Lower granary inspection. Send for Rhea first. Era moved to the corridor runner post, but the signal line was dead. No bell pull response, no guard answer from either stair. The steward, suddenly sweating, backed away one step. I only carried what I was given. Bootsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor, too many and too quiet. 4 men rounded the corner in northern cloaks with face wraps pulled high. Their insignia tabs were turned inward to hide unit marks. Era shoved Celeste behind her and drew a short blade she probably had no official permission to carry. Wrong wing, she called, voice hard. State watchword. The lead man did not answer. He raised a hand, and moon sand flared from his palm in a blinding white burst meant to disorient, not kill. Era cursed, slashing through the cloud. Celeste caught the wall to steady herself as the world swam. Move her, one attacker said. Southern accent under the cloth. Now. They advanced with weighted nets woven in silver thread, designed for restraint. Celeste's fear came sharp and clear, but beneath it another current rose, older than panic. The ward stones in the mountain answered her pulse with a faint hum through the floor, as if listening. She did not run blindly. She took Era's arm and pulled left toward the Skybridge corridor, where open air and rune-carved balustrades gave her at least one chance to call for witnesses. Behind them, the attackers closed. At the bridge midpoint, wind knifed through lattice stone and tore the breath from her lungs. One net snapped past her shoulder and tangled on the rail. Another struck Era's blade and dropped short. Celeste planted her feet, hand braced over her belly, and faced them. The lead attacker ripped off his face wrap. It was Soren, the quartermaster, somehow free of restraint, lips stained with bitter root dust and eyes fever-bright with desperation. He promised amnesty, Soren said, voice shaking. Said no one would be hurt. Just a transfer, just signatures. From the shadowed arch behind him, Drake stepped into moonlight as if he had been expected there all along. Celeste, he said softly, do not make this uglier than it must be. The bridge doors slammed shut on both ends with a heavy iron boom, and this time there was no pretense of peace left in the night. Wind tore through the stone lattice and drove Celeste's hair across her face. Soren lifted his hand, and the men behind him spread out with practiced spacing, 2 to flank Era, 2 to hem Celeste against the carved balustrade. Their nets glittered with silver thread weights meant to cinch tight under struggle. Drake remained 3 steps back, gloves immaculate, expression composed enough to be obscene. Listen to me, he said, voice almost gentle. You are exhausted, surrounded, and carrying a child. This can still end quietly. Come with me, sign the transfer accords, and I will guarantee safe lodging until birth. Era gave a short, disbelieving laugh and shifted her blade into a reverse grip. He means a locked room, and witnesses he pays. Soren's mouth twitched. Do not make me do this, healer. You already did, Era snapped. One attacker rushed her. Steel rang. Era turned the first strike and drove an elbow into his ribs, but a second man cast a net low and caught her ankles. She slashed through one strand, then took a shoulder hit that sent her hard against the wall. Celeste lunged for her, and another weighted net whipped through the air toward her midsection. She twisted, too slow. Silver mesh struck her upper arm and dragged. Panic spiked white-hot. No closed rooms, no signatures under a false seal. No one decides my child's fate in the dark again. Drake watched her struggle and took one step closer. This is the last kind offer you will get. From you? Celeste's breath came sharp, but her voice held. Keep it. He sighed, as if disappointed in poor manners. Take her. The next seconds fractured into impact and sound. Ira surged up with a shout and cut through the net, pinning Celeste's arm, then caught a punch that split her lip and dropped her to one knee. Soren advanced with moon sand in one hand and a restraint clasp in the other, muttering the opening words of a binding rite that made Celeste's skin crawl. Then the hum under the bridge deepened. Celeste felt it through her feet first, then her bones. The ward stones answering her pulse, not as a distant system of king law, but as old pack magic threaded through mountain and blood. Her mother had once told her, in a whisper over winter sewing, that Starfall women could call memory from stone if cornered badly enough. Celeste had laughed then, fairy tale comfort for frightened daughters. Now, with Soren closing in and Drake's men tightening the circle, the old story returned like a blade brought to hand. She slammed her palm against the rune-carved balustrade. Light shot through the carved channels in a rapid silver cascade. The nearest attacker cried out and dropped his net as the weight sparked and smoked. Every ward mark along the bridge flared, then flared again, brighter, until the air itself vibrated. Soren staggered back. "What did you do?" Celeste did not answer him. She pressed both hands to the stone and called with everything she had left. Not words, intent, witness. The fortress alarm bells detonated all at once, from gate towers to inner keep, a thunder of bronze that shook frost from the arches. Locks on both bridge doors snapped open with a cracking report. Far below, voices rose, boots striking stairs in converging waves. Drake's composure finally broke. "Stop her!" He lunged, not at her throat, but at her wrist, a bronze clamp in his fist etched with old blood-binding runes. Celeste tore free by sheer panic and momentum, taking skin from her own knuckles against the stone. Era, bleeding from the mouth and furious, drove herself between them and bought 2 seconds with a wild, effective slash that forced Drake sideways. 2 seconds was enough. Celeste ran. She did not run inward toward hiding. She ran uphill, through the opened arch and into the moonlit passage that led to the bastion courtyard where treaties were witnessed and oaths could not be sealed in secret. Behind her, Drake shouted orders. Ahead, the alarm kept hammering. Less than 10 minutes later, breath burning in her lungs, she burst through the last gate and into Moon Bastion. The courtyard was already filling. Northern guards poured in from 3 entrances. Elders, roused from chambers, gathered on the terrace steps in layered cloaks. Shadowfang delegates were dragged under watch from guest quarters, faces pale with confusion and calculation. Above them all, the oath pillars stood at the center dais, white stone veined with old runes that glimmered under the high, hard moon. Celeste climbed the first 2 steps and turned before her knees could fail. She braced one hand over the curve of her belly and lifted her other hand toward the pillar. "Witness hearing," she called, voice ragged but carrying. "Public, now." The courtyard stilled with that peculiar silence that came when power shifted and no one trusted the ground yet. Dante crossed the threshold from the western stair at a near run, Rhea at his side, 6 wolves fanning behind. His gaze found Celeste, scanned her in one brutal sweep for injury, then locked on Drake as the man arrived under guard at sword point, cloak torn, breath sharp. "Stand down," Dante said to everyone and no one. "No one moves without my word." Drake straightened his collar as if entering a banquet. "Your Majesty, this spectacle is unnecessary. She is in distress and dangerous to herself." Celeste laughed once, harsh and unbelieving. "You tried to drag me across a bridge in restraints." "For your protection," Drake said, then spread his hands toward the assembled elders. "I requested lawful transfer. She assaulted officers and triggered ward instability. If this is your chosen Luna, ask whether the North can survive her volatility." Dante started forward. Celeste lifted her hand without looking at him, a clear stop. He halted on instinct, jaw set, and gave her the floor in front of both packs. That was the moment she chose. I am done pleading to be believed. I am done offering neat versions of pain so cowards can stay comfortable. I am shaking, and I am still standing. This body they call liability has crossed mountains, hunger, betrayal, and now this. My child is not a prize. I am not a corridor between ambitious men. If truth costs me everything tonight, then let it cost in public, under the moon, with names attached. She placed both palms on the oath pillar. The runes drank her touch and erupted in silver-white lines that raced across the courtyard stones. Gasps broke from the terrace as light climbed the pillar and spread overhead in a thin arc like a lifted veil. Images began to form within it, not perfect illusions, but memory echoes, fragments of sound and motion pulled from stone witness. Drake in the grain outbuilding, lantern at his feet, saying stewardship in that patient voice while transfer writs waited open. Drake's hand on forged seals, pressing her father's signet into wax before the pyre smoke had cleared. Soren in the lower granary passage exchanging bitterroot packets for coin and a stamped promise of amnesty. The bridge, the net, the bronze binding clamp. The echoes flickered, overlapped, then stabilized as Celeste poured everything through the pillar, knees buckling under the strain. Dante moved half a step, stopped when she shook her head. She held. Rhea barked, "Seize Soren!" 2 guards slammed Soren to the stone. He did not resist this time. "He said it would be clean," he babbled. "No deaths, just leverage." He swore it. Drake's face had gone rigid, then ugly. Memorycraft can be fabricated. She is Starfall Line. She can counterfeit witness. A runner stumbled from the east gate with raven tubes in both hands, dropped to one knee, and held them up. River Court priority return. Seal analysis complete. The archivist broke the tube, scanned, and read aloud in a shaking voice. All submitted Shadowfang succession seals in this packet are false impressions. Ink compounds inconsistent with council registry. 3 witness knots are copied tracings. Murmurs hit like surf against rock. Shadowfang delegates recoiled from Drake by instinct. Drake's eyes snapped to Celeste, calculation burning off into naked desperation. He took one step toward the dais and another, hands open as if to reason. "Family should protect family, Celeste," he said, voice dropping to the tone he had used in the dark outbuilding. "I made you useful." Celeste met his stare and let the whole courtyard hear her answer. "You did not betray me because I was weak. You betrayed me because you feared what I would become." Drake snarled and shifted, bones cracking through half-form in a reckless surge, claws tearing free as he launched for the pillar. He never reached her. Celeste pivoted, planted her stance, and drove both hands forward. Silver-white chain lightning leapt from her palms in braided arcs, wrapped his torso and wrists mid-lunge, and slammed him backward into the oath pillar with a force that shook stone dust loose from the terrace edge. Runes ignited beneath him, crawling over his skin and clothing in burning script that did not char flesh, but locked every muscle in place. Drake thrashed once, twice, then screamed as the pillar rejected him. Dante stepped to Celeste's right, not shielding her from view, standing with her. His voice rang across the bastion. "By king law and witness of both packs, your claim dies with your lies." Drake spat wild-eyed. "I can still lead them. They need me." "Look," Celeste said. He did. Shadowfang's delegates had dropped their gazes, then their knees, not to him, away from him. An elder from his own side, white-haired and shaking, spoke hoarsely. "Drake Shadowfang, you stand as oathbreaker and forger. I strip your provisional rank under witness." Dante's claws extended in one swift, controlled motion. He took the replica command sigil from Drake's belt and crushed it in his fist until metal split and fell in ruined fragments at the base of the pillar. Drake tried one final full shift, muscles heaving against the bindings. The runes flared and held. His strength broke against truth-marked stone and went nowhere. Celeste descended one step, then another, until she stood directly in front of him, close enough that he had to see her clearly and close enough that no one could pretend this sentence belonged to Dante alone. "Drake Shadowfang," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "For forged accusation, attempted coercive binding, conspiracy to poison border stores, and unlawful abduction under peace banner, I sentence you to lifelong exile beyond consecrated borders. Your name is erased from Starfall and Shadowfang record. You will hold no rank, no vote, no blood claim." She looked to the assembled elders of both packs. "Witness and enter it." One by one they answered. Witnessed. The chain lightning faded to a firm rune restraint. Guards moved in with moon iron shackles. Drake did not speak again as they took him from the pillar. He stared at Celeste with the hollow fury of a man who had mistaken control for destiny and found neither. When he was gone beyond the gate arch, the courtyard exhaled. Dante turned to her then, eyes fierce and bright with pride he did not hide. He touched 2 fingers to his heart, then bowed his head to her in front of everyone. Celeste swayed, exhausted to the marrow, and Era caught her elbow with a shaky grin and blood still drying at her lip. Dawn's first pale line touched the eastern ridge, and under that thin light the bastion no longer felt like a court built for judgment alone. It felt for the first time like ground she could stand on without asking permission. Dante did not rush her off the dais or hide her behind rank. He stayed at her side while the legal machinery turned in full view of both packs, because truth had nearly been buried once, and neither of them would allow a private burial this time. By late morning, the Moon Bastion Records chamber was crowded with scribes, elders, and witnesses under oath flame. The iron-bound chest Drake had carried was opened again, each packet lifted with tongs, logged, and compared against registry wax. River Court's analysis was entered first, then the Mountain Conclave Registrar's return arrived by Raven, confirming the same pattern of copied knots and counterfeit impressions. The forged transfer writs from the Grainout building, recovered from Drake's guest quarters in a false-bottom travel case, were matched to the same ink compound as the chest documents. Her father's missing signet was found wrapped in lambskin inside that case, and when archivist Pell placed it in Celeste's hands, the room fell silent enough to hear the scratch of quills stop. The coded strip taken from the harness strap was read aloud with Soren present in restraints. He tried to bargain once, then broke under cross-questioning from Rhea and confessed to taking Drake's bribe, releasing the false summons through a copied sign tablet and staging the corridor blackout. The junior steward who had carried the tablet was cleared. He had been threatened with his sister's dismissal if he refused. Dante ordered the record amended in open court so the steward's name remained untainted. The bitterroot packets, silver thread nets, and the bronze binding clamp were all entered into evidence and sealed in the Bastion vault for treaty audit. Nothing was left floating in rumor. Varric knelt and renewed his oath without challenge, asking to serve the first watch at the new refuge gate as penance for doubting her. Tolan, shoulder-bound and pride-scorched, did the same, and admitted he had followed fear of instability, not proof. Celeste accepted both and set terms herself. Service, not spectacle, and no man in Refuge Command without healer oversight. Era's mouth twitched in grim approval. No one in the room missed that Dante let Celeste speak first on every sanctuary statute. When the last seal was impressed, Shadowfang's interim delegation stood and surrendered Drake's provisional succession claim. Elder Marin did not appear in person. Her written apology arrived at dusk, formal and spare, acknowledging council failure and requesting permission to testify before Celeste at the next convocation. Celeste read it twice, then told Pell to archive it with the trial ledger. "Not absolution," she said. "Record." By nightfall, the northern sky cleared to hard black glass, and Aurora began to spill in green and silver ribbons above the high terrace where Dante had once kept his solitude like armor. He waited there without cloak, despite the cold, hands open at his sides when Celeste stepped out beneath the lights. No guards, no ceremony, just stone, stars, and breath clouding between them. "I asked the watch to keep distance," he said. "If you want this night to end with sleep and locked doors and no claims, I will walk you back now." She crossed the space until she could feel his heat in the winter air. "And if I do not want to walk back?" His eyes held hers, steady and unguarded in a way she had never seen in any man with power. "Then I offer first." He tilted his head and bared the line of his throat, pulse strong beneath skin. The gesture hit her with a force deeper than desire, because this was Dante Wildfire, Alpha King of the North, giving vulnerability before dominance, trust before possession. Celeste lifted her hand to his neck. "Are you certain?" "Yes." She did not bite yet. She stepped closer, forehead to his chest, and listened to his heartbeat while the aurora moved across the stone like slow water. The child shifted, calm and warm, and that quiet certainty returned. Not erasure of fear, but room beyond it. Dante's hand came up, stopping just short of her shoulder. "Celeste, may I mark you?" She looked up at him and nodded. "Mark me." His mouth found the junction of her neck and shoulder with reverence that almost undid her. The first pressure of Fang was sharp, clean pain that made her gasp into his collar, fingers clutching hard at the back of his tunic. Then the bond opened. Warmth surged from the bite through her spine in a radiant wave, down her arms to her palms, through her belly where the child answered with one strong kick, then settled in a deep, peaceful roll. Not burning, not frenzy, a profound alignment, as if every fractured part of her had been called by true name and answered. She heard him breathe against her skin, heard the rough whisper at the edge of his control. "Mine." The word did not cage her, it anchored. She pulled back only enough to see his face, eyes bright with emotion he no longer concealed. "Yours," she whispered, and slid her hand to the nape of his neck. "My turn." Dante's breath caught, and he bowed his head further, offering the pulse point. Celeste pressed her lips there first, a promise, then bit. His body went rigid for one heartbeat, then shuddered with the same transforming current that had crossed into her, and she felt it return through the bond in silver and gold threads knotting tight between them, visible in the air for a breath like moonlit strands drawn from skin to skin. "Mate," he said, voice broken open with wonder. "Mate," she answered. They stood locked together while the claim settled, foreheads touching, hands splayed over each other's marks as if confirming reality by touch alone. The mountain wind did not feel cruel anymore. It felt clean. Dante cupped her face, thumbs rough and careful. "No one takes you from me again." She leaned into him, smiling through tears she did not hide. "Not even my past." He kissed her then. Not hunger, not conquest, just recognition made tender. And when they finally drew breath apart, the bond rested inside her like a steady flame that would not be shaken loose. 4 months later, the great courtyard that had once watched her trial by rumor held two packs shoulder to shoulder under full moon banners. Torches lined the path to the oath pillar. Refuge hearth smoke rose from a newly finished stone wing at the northern gate, and its carved lintel carried Celeste's first decree in both scripts. No carrying wolf shall be surrendered for debt, vengeance, or succession claim. The claiming ceremony began with law because she had insisted that love and governance stand in the same light. Pell read the covenant articles aloud. Shared rule between Alpha King Dante Wildfire and High Luna Celeste Starfall. Independent sanctuary tribunal under healer authority. Dual pack food oversight to prevent another famine plot. and cross-border witness review for any future bloodline accusation. Each clause was answered by both elder circles in clear voice. Ira, now first healer of the refuge, carried the child to the moon altar wrapped in white wool edged with northern silver. Rhea stood at Celeste's right in command leathers, Varric on the left at gate captain rank, and Tolan behind them in plain guard black, restored only after a season of service without breach. Soren had already been sentenced and transferred to consecrated labor ward beyond the quarry road, alive, contained, and stripped of office. Drake's exile was entered in both archives. His name had been chiseled from Shadowfang's succession stone that morning under witness, exactly as sentenced. When Ira placed the baby in Celeste's arms, the courtyard softened in a way no decree could manufacture. Dante stepped close, one hand at Celeste's back, one finger brushing the child's tiny fist until it curled around him with fierce certainty. Laughter moved through the gathered wolves, relieved and bright. Dante spoke his vow first, voice carrying to the walls. I claim you before moon and law, as equal in crown, equal in command, equal in my life. Celeste answered, her mark visible at her shoulder, his at his throat. I claim you before moon and law, as partner, as home, as the man who asked when others took. They sealed the vows with joined hands over the child, and the Pax knelt not to fear, but to witness a new order written in survival and chosen trust. Somewhere above, Aurora unfurled again over the old northern border, no longer a death line in whispered stories, but a living gate where the rejected were received, named, and kept safe.